This episode brought to you by
GTM AI Academy. Learn AI from a globally trusted resource. Coach K, Jonathan Carfort. Their bundle, Enablement AI Mastery, includes both the core Generative AI Foundations course and Enablement AI Mastery specifically. Each course has a value of $599 individually, but Coach K is offering them as a bundle with reduced pricing. And as a listener of the Inside Sales Enablement podcast, if you act now, you can use code ISE30 to get an additional 30% off of the entire thing. You will also receive free access to the GTM AI Tools demo library. Coach K has done the demos, so you don't have to, and offers his straight shooting opinion, fact-based through an enablement lens. Go to www.gtmaiacademy.com and enter code ISE30 today and elevate your AI enablement game.
Welcome to the Inside Sales Enablement podcast. Where has the profession been? Where is it now? And where is it heading? What does it mean to you, your company, other functions, the market? Find out here. Join the founding father of the sales enablement profession, Scott Santucci, and trailblazer Brian Lambert as they take you behind the scenes of the birth of an industry. The Inside Sales Enablement podcast starts now.
I'm Scott Santucci.
I'm Brian Lambert, and we are the Sales Enablement Insiders. Our podcast is for sales enablement leaders looking to elevate their function, expand their sphere of influence, and increase the span of control within their companies.
Together, Brian and I have worked on over 100 different kinds of sales enablement initiatives as analysts, consultants, or practitioners. We've learned the hard way what works, and maybe what most important, what doesn't.
In a previous episode, we talked about who the customer is of sales enablement, and we answered that as the person who decided on your role and invested in it. Your department often exists based on a challenge that someone in your organization wants to address, and how you scope it matters. And today we're going to talk about why you're in the specific situation that you're in, and we're going to compare and contrast the different situations in order to help you move forward in next year's 2020, and also take action in a way that makes most sense for your organization. So as usual, we start with a centering story to give our episode a theme. So Scott, take it away from here.
So we're recording after Thanksgiving, so we thought maybe a holiday theme would be very appropriate. And what Christmas holiday story wouldn't be great without a whole conversation about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
That's right. Lay it on us.
So here we are at the Sales Enablement Insiders podcast, and we've talked about things like Mendeleev and his periodic table. We recently talked about the Edsel. Now we're talking about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. And you know the story about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He's tired of just being viewed as a parlor trick. So him and Henry the elf, if you remember, he's the elf that doesn't want to be an elf. He wants to be a dentist. So they go off to just on their own journey, and they run into they land on an island, and that island is the island of what?
It's actually the land of Misfit toys.
The land, that's right, the land of Misfit toys. Yep, thanks. And they run into that lion. His name's King Moonracer. And if you can,
I didn't know that.
I didn't know it was King Moonracer.
No. Is that the point of the story? No, just kidding.
Yeah, that's the point, right? To educate you on Christmas tales. Actually, Bob Britton, I wouldn't be surprised if he would send you a note because he likes the King Moonracer reference. But really, what is he the king of? He's this land of misfit toys, and there's all of these toys that aren't good enough that were rejected by Santa to give toys to kids, and one of them. Like one of these toys that's particularly funny to me is a kite, and its misfitness is it's afraid of heights.
That's right. And when I first watched this, I was not creeped out at all of this children's tale.
Right. So that there's all these different misfits, and King Moonracer unites them, and brings them together, and makes them find meaning and the like. So that's our story.
Wow, that's interesting. So what the heck does that have to do with sales enablement? Are you saying that we're misfits, or have we inherited misfit toys?
Well, it's a story that resonates. So how does it relate? There's two reasons. So for those of you who don't know, Brian and I were involved at Forrester way back in as early as 2008, starting the sales enablement research practice. And back then, there was a whole bunch of what is sales enablement. There weren't a lot of definition for it. Now we probably have way too many definitions, and we're probably at the same. I think we were probably more clear about what it was back then. But a metaphor, we use this metaphor a lot to describe the role. And really the role is, the head of broken things. You are King Moonracer of your own organization. You've been inherited. You might have inherited, or at least a lot of those early sales enablement professionals would inherit things that maybe the marketing department want to touch, things that sales managers didn't want to touch, things that sales VPs didn't want to touch, and things that sales operations didn't want to touch. So wonderful things like simplifying the CRM system, or selecting new technologies to use because vendors would come in and make briefings, or fixing various other broken things like the price configuration management system and things like that. So that's really the nucleus. And the second reason that maps is many of the people in the sales enablement side, of which Brian and I were very instrumental in starting. Actually, it was me calling Brian up in February or in January of 2016 saying, hey, maybe we should start a local area networking group. And a lot of people who were really some of the first members of the Sales Enablement Society really looked at that as that is also a metaphor. We're a collection of people who are trying to get together to figure this stuff out. So those are ways of why it matches.
Yeah, that makes sense. And since that time, it continues. And maybe they're not broken things, but they're the land of maybe cool and cutting edge things, such as AI-driven coaching or role-based applications for learning, right? So not only have sales enablement leaders maybe inherited broken things, but they're piloting some cool stuff too, right? So I don't know what island that is, but I like the metaphor because in both situations, these are items that are maybe one-off or a little bit outside the norm of business as usual. In both situations.
Maybe it's sort of the island of broken things are you exist to fix problems, and the island of shiny things is your job is to help us figure out how to take advantage of it, enable it,
right,
activate it. Either way, you're outside of the mainstream, and as we all know, the mainstream, the standard operating procedure, is pretty aggressive and pretty. There's a lot of culture that goes around that, and being outside of those two windows can put you in a tough spot.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also a tough spot because of the nature of the transformation that many companies are going under. I think when you look at growth today and what companies are doing to drive new business models, new revenue streams, evolve their platforms, become more of a all-inclusive one-stop shop for technology, and bring new capabilities to market, growth, it really becomes the mandate, and it's almost anybody's turf. It could be products turf, marketing's turf, sales, obviously, and the CEOs really trying to drive and pull these different levers. And one of the levers that he or she is pulling is this idea of sales enablement as a growth driver. However, Scott, you and I have both talked about this. We don't see that an awful lot, but where those folks are doing it and becoming the other side of the go-to-market, the execution side of go-to-market, they're pretty busy and they're not hanging out at these conferences that many people are going to. and they don't necessarily want to hear from vendors about the strategies that they should be engaging in to drive the go-to-market forward. And there's a big gap between what I would say the aspiration is of what they're tackling versus the reality that's unfolding out on the internet or the web or even in job boards or Sales Enablement Society postings, et cetera. And I think that gap, I would say, is really around, why are we here? And I like the Misfit toy analogy because it really gets to the question of why are we here? What do you think about that?
So I think that's great. I think what you've done is provide a great landscape. So first of all, in the overall market, we all know sales transformation is happening in the overall landscape. Then within your company, these things are happening, whether they're being actively discussed to where you can see it is a different story. But if you're a sales enablement professional, you're probably stuck in the, hey, I've got the bright shiny toys and I've got the broken toys, and I am really struggling or trying to carve out my niche or add value in the operating rhythm that our sales force is in right now. So the challenge that creates is it creates a situation where if you're a sales enablement professional, you're probably thinking, hey, a lot of the stuff that you talked about, Brian, is interesting, but I can't afford to think about that stuff. That sounds too theoretical, too strategic. I gotta keep my nose to the grindstone and just execute. That's one gut reaction that we typically hear. Another reaction that you might be feeling, sort of like when you go home from work and wonder, did I add value today? Am I being valued? You go home and think about, talk with your spouse about whether you should get a raise or not, or whether or not you can go ask for the next round of funding next year. All of these different questions that you might go on in yourself, and you just don't know. Why don't you know? Why aren't those things clear? You don't know because you don't really have control of managing expectations of what your department is. And maybe you think you do because you think it's really, 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 really clear. The clarity of my role is very specific. It's clear on my MBOs, and all I have to do is execute those MBOs every quarter. And I show that I'm hitting those MBOs every quarter. I'm valuable because somebody else has defined what that value is. But the reality is that many sales enablement leaders talk to us. This is a common theme. I wonder if you run into this too, Brian, is that many sales enablers I talk to say, I'm really frustrated. The company just thinks that I'm just a trainer. And sales enablement is so much more.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just treated like a trader.
Yeah, I've heard that. And I've also heard, if the executive team would fund us more, we could do more. And I think you're spot on between this area of, super tactical, I get stuff done, versus the handful that are, helping figure out what to do, figure stuff out strategically. What are we going to do here? And then there's the get stuff done crowd. In the middle is this gray area, and you get kind of buffeted around by the forces. It feels like you're maybe on a ride there, and in that ride of your life, things start coming up like you're pointing out, Scott, and how do you get control of that? How do you enter into the rhythm of the business and drive as a valuable partner?
Yeah, so you have we're going to use a case study here, and Brian and I are going to solve two different ways, but there's really only three choices that you have. So this is the good news, right? The good news is in the world of complexity and all the swirling dervish that we've just talked about, you really only have three choices, right? So here they are. Choice number one, you can decide or believe, whichever it is, you can decide that the way that you personally are going to add value to the company is say yes to as many people as possible. I'm enabling your success. They're coming to me because they're asking me for it. I got to say yes. Completing the tasks at a high quality. We make sure that they're done well. They have the right polish. We get them on getting them done on a deadline. And maybe your internal brand is I get shit done. That's choice number one. Choice number two, you can do the things And then with choice number one, really the whole idea is if I keep doing more of that, if I keep working hard, obviously somebody's going to value our department, expand our scope, and give me a raise and give me the resources that I need to do more. The second scenario is, well, I want to take more of that and control my hand, so I want to plant the seed. So I'm going to do everything that I'm doing in number one, concentrating on getting stuff done, but I'm going to take some of these reports that I'm seeing, and I'm going to start sending them off to people, or I'm going to start positioning my department. And I'm hopeful that these reports will allow the VP of sales to go, wow, this sales enablement is way more than training, or wow, I had no idea how complicated your function is. I should give you a promotion, or whatever your goal is. That's scenario number two. And scenario number three is to campaign more proactively. Go and start talking to the individual department leaders, talk to them and give them insights about challenges that they're running into, and help them see what the real problems are. Let them dwell on it, and then wait to ask for your how you can help, and really illuminate and elevate the function.
So those are three areas. So number one, if you're following along, is to get stuff done.
Yep.
Two would be sending up reports and data to help drive or.
Well, I wouldn't say data. I would say external reports.
External reports.
Number three is you're providing insights. So that's your own data, your own analysis.
Okay, and number two is maybe external thought leadership reports, et cetera.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So, and then there's pros and cons to each of these, but what we're going to do before we get into that is tell a little bit of have a situation that our listeners can participate in. So we're going to use onboarding, and the reason why we're going to use onboarding is a lot of people are engaged in that in some form or fashion. And then number two is if they're not engaged in it now, they probably will be at some point. So we're going to use that as a way to have a shared experience here. And what I'm going to do is I'll be in camp one, the get stuff done crowd, and basically talking about tasks, et cetera. And then Scott will be talking about, area three, about being more proactively managing and defining the value contribution of the function. So from an onboarding perspective, let's just say we have a program already, and that program is a 2-week boot camp. We have regularly scheduled classes, and the ask is by the management team, sales managers, as well as our bosses, to look at how we shorten it, and then also how we add different skills to it. So that's the simple scenario. Is that good with you, Scott?
Sure.
Okay. So I'll be reactive guy. My reactive guy, what I'll do and how I might action it is I would do a bit of research. I would figure out trends, figure out through my own experience what I might want to do to provide some topics through e-learning because everybody else is doing it. I would build a bulleted list of what we're going to do, and then I'd give it to my boss and ask for permission to go. And once I got it, I would go do that. And then I would communicate what we're doing to sales, and I would make sure that the sales managers are aware of the changes that are coming. Something like that. And I'd do that within 90 days because that's what my value is. I get stuff done.
Gotcha. So here's how I would tackle it proactively. The first thing that I would do is I'd define terms. So this is a step that I know a lot of people hate to do, but I would define specifically what does an onboarded person look like. And I would define it in such a way that it was measurable. So I'd have some sort of scorecard of what actually constitutes an onboarded person. The reason that I'd want to do that is because I'm going to be evaluated on the success of the onboarding program, and I don't want a he said, she said debate afterwards about whether or not it works or not. What I know is, because this is a step that I go through with a lot of clients, I know there isn't a defined spec. And people, because it's undefined, people have their own expectations for it. So for example, a sales manager's expectation might be, they've just gone through the course and they know how to work some of the basic functions, but I got to train them up on how to sell. And then a sales leader might think it's time to quota is when somebody's in the onboarding process. And if our sales cycle time is, say, 9 months, it's unrealistic for me to be held to a spec of 9 months, because there's interactions with sales managers and like. So I first want to define the term. Then I'd want to analyze. So that's number one. Then once I've got the definition of the term and clarity of what it is, then I want to do data. And the data that I want to collect is I'm a big fan of baselining. So the next thing that I would do is I'd baseline and say, given this definition, how long did past classes take to become onboarded? And I'd go through the data of all the different past classes. I'd find a way to say this is class 1, class 2, class 3. And I'd simplify it, because you're going to have so many different batches. Simplify it to a year and figure out what that metric is. And I'd do a readout of that metric, just that one metric. And that readout would be sort of informal, sort of, hey, I'm learning this. I'm interested in your input in this observation. And you're going to find that you probably don't have enough of the right data to do it, so publish that to actually collect it. But you're also going to find that in many cases, because the clients that I've done, the expectation that management has of how long that takes is a lot shorter than what the reality of the data says. I'll give you one example. One client we did this through, the management expectation was 12 months, and all of the data, the best class was 24 months to get to a metric of onboarded. So now you're like, wow. Because then what that does is step number 3, it allows you to evaluate the program. So you mentioned the cases that we currently have a program. Well, that's muscle memory, the way we've always done things. In my experience, what is the composition of that program? That composition is individual product managers want to have space in the onboarding program. So let's in our scenario, it's a week. So I have to allot time for individual product managers to talk about their products. We have to allot time for the benefits people to talk about the benefits, because this is new hire onboarding, right? So we want to provide benefit training. And then, of course, we've got a huge slap of time, because their sales operations people want to make sure that everybody knows how to use the CRM system. So we probably have a half day dedicated to learning how to use Salesforce.com. And along the way, we pull all these things together. We mix in some mixers. We meet the management. Maybe we come in and meet executives. And as a result of that, what are people prepared to do? They're not really prepared to perform or really do anything. So they get released to the sales managers. And now are those people who've gone through that course, are they onboarded or not? What do they do? So then I'd say, based on the metric that we've agreed on, so step number 4, based on the metric that we've agreed upon, what should the curriculum look like? And do a gap analysis between the current curriculum and what the curriculum should look like. Now you have to make tough decisions and say, and the reason that I've done the analysis stages and shopped that around and included sales management beforehand is because they have context. So now I have some support to be able to push back and say, hey, the benefit training and the CRM system training and the culture training, we're going to move all of that to just in time. And we're going to make those modules. We're going to use e-learning for that. And we're going to make that just in time available, because a salesperson's only going to really pay attention to what the benefits package is when they need to execute the benefits package and make the choices. So let's make that information available there. And the second thing is, you really only learn how to do the CRM system when you actually have a real opportunity. So how do you do that? How do you move those things just in time? Then the next thing is, in terms of product training and the like, we'll simplify that. We won't have individual product heads to provide it. We're going to concentrate on, helping our reps get first meetings, get opportunities going and building pipelines. So we're going to redo the whole course to be a lot more about the buyers that we're dealing with in those scenarios, and say this is what our program is going to be, and invite participants who can talk like customers. And we're going to do a lot of role plays around that and make it really, really fun. And then we're going to have a very specific role, for our executives, and say this is what we want to address. This is the culture that we want to, get off, and what our objectives are, and put all of those pieces together so that we can have a scorecard at the end and measure what results look like. That's how I tackle that.
All right. So herein, folks, if you're still with us,
Thank you.
And this is an interesting phenomenon, and I see it all the time. Mine was 1 minute. Scott's was 10 minutes. Mine was in the mainstream bloodstream of what everybody knows and what everybody feels, and it felt like hell yeah, probably to people. Like, that's exactly what we should do. Let's go. And then here comes Scott's, right? and it's like, wow, it's so different. It's 900 times longer, 900% longer. He's saying stuff that we don't talk a lot about, and I get uncomfortable with that. This might be what you're hearing here in the car. For those that are still with, because, I've seen it in the past where people can't hang 10 minutes to talk about onboarding. And that's really what just happened. In his proactive approach, we spent 10 minutes talking about a proactive approach to onboarding. And there are two reactions, those that love that discussion, Scott, and those that want to, reach through their device and strangle you right now. And I wanted to highlight that because I purposefully went a minute on mine, and I don't even know if it was right, to be honest with you. I don't know if people would agree with it. I really don't care, because I'm taking action in 90 days. It don't matter, because I'll be on to the next thing. But with yours at 10 minutes, you're going to open yourself up for discussion because of the gap you're creating around being proactive. And I think this is the challenge with the individual role, but also the challenge with the function, because it can feel a little sideways to the mainstream. And what I would suggest is people go back and re-listen to the proactive one, because my guess is they couldn't digest Scott's 10 minutes. And they may have to listen to it 2 to 3 times, but we're only talking 10 minutes. And we are talking about proactive, which everybody agrees is important. What's up with that? Right? So I don't know, Scott. I just wanted to call that out because I loved your 5 steps. 1, define what it means to be onboarded. 2, what's the expectation of the leadership team. 3 is how we're going to evaluate what it is and what good looks like. And then 4 is make some decisions around what it should look like and how we're going to architect it. And then 5 is what are the trade-offs, And that makes a heck of a lot of sense. Mine was like, gather input, create a list of topics, get an approval from my boss, and get it done in 90 days. Right?
Yeah, you can still do all the steps that I shared in 90 days also. It's just being...
Yeah, I don't know, man. That seems so hard. I'm just kidding.
It's not that hard.
I know.
The steps aren't hard. It's being disciplined, and it's really just the bedside manner of shopping the idea.
Yeah, and it's also, you talked about muscle memory, the inertia, the muscle memory of the internal managers and leaders. That 10 minutes of space that you just occupied with the sales enablement folks on the listening, those folks would have to go and occupy 10 minutes of time with sales leaders sales, their bosses, et cetera. And if they're not comfortable doing 10 minutes, nobody else is going to be comfortable listening to them or working with them for 10 minutes. And if they can't do 10 minutes, how are they going to tackle the root cause, challenges to drive outcomes? And I think that's the difference between playing a Misfit toys and being, asked to get stuff done versus figure stuff out. And I would say it's the difference between reactive and proactive.
So I think here's what's an interesting observation is I like what you said about, 10 minutes of space. And I don't have 10 minutes and no one's going to pay attention for 10 minutes or whatever. Guess what? That is the problem that your salespeople are dealing with right now. If you want to be, I think that if you want to be a effective sales enablement leader, you've got to be really, you got to put yourself in situations where you can be very empathetic with what the real, the reality that your salespeople are dealing with. And if you're like most companies and you're, offering a new capability or a new product set that's, transformative in nature, you're gonna have to be able to do that anyway, right? So you're gonna have to be able to, you have to empathize with that, because no matter what project that you roll out and what it does, if it's not addressing those issues, how do you balance, like, for example, how do you bring up a commercial insight? There's a lot of talk in Challenger Sale about, you have to have a commercial insight. And you do a lot of training on a commercial insight. How do you actually bring up a commercial insight to a customer who doesn't have the 10 minutes to give you? It's sort of the same thing. Here's a commercial insight about how to tackle sales operations or sales onboarding. Here are the steps that you need to go through. Here's sort of the structure. And by doing this, it allows you to be transformative. But if you don't want to take the 10 minutes, to digest and learn it, how are you going to take advantage of it? Sort of the same
and we
thing.
set this podcast up purposefully that way, right? We were trucking along. Everybody's on their treadmill, on their ride, on the Insider Nation train. Boom, we're hitting onboarding, boom, boom, boom. And then here comes Scott with let's be proactive. And it's like coming up the works, but it shouldn't. Why is that?
Yeah.
And to your point, there's a lot of things like that, not only, what is a commercial insight, but, I have yet to understand what a buyer journey is or a persona. And we've talked a lot about this. These are overgeneralizations of reality that salespeople have to deal with. So we just gave a little 10-minute dose of reality. And I think there's a choice that people need to make, and it's going to reflect in their function. Are we going to fit in and do the mainstream reactive work, or are we going to elevate the function, elevate the role? And that really gets to, why are you here? And
let's talk about post that. So okay, so you can criticize me on the 10 minutes, and that was a lot of detail and a lot of stuff. Let's talk about after. So let's say, Brian, you've executed your thing. Let's assume it goes well. What next? How are you perceived as being valuable?
What's the next thing? And that's about it. What's the next thing? With the least amount of headache, because that was a little bit of no headache, and nobody complained about anything. So we're on to the next one, feeding the beast.
Yep.
And actually, let's feed the beast globally. So can you get on a plane for the next 6 months?
Yep. So, and that's really your remit is going to be pretty much centered around sales onboarding. And it might include maybe technology selection and, the care and feeding and the tweaking of the technology system, and constantly improving what that onboarding focus is. Is that sales enablement? Is that going to help you change your focus or the perception inside the company that you're just training? Because what is everybody else going to see?
The answer to that is no. I mean, everybody's going to see you as the onboarding person. You're actually going to be reinforcing and hardening that expectation, and you're going to be the king or queen of onboarding, and that's all that you're going to get boxed in.
Yep.
In that situation.
So let's give the alternate situation. I rattle off those steps. I've been through this rodeo many times with many clients. let me give you a other side of that ledger. Let's go back to because you actually did the work to come up with the data. Now I have insights. Those insights aren't external insights or reports from Forrester, Gartner, or whatever that our executives aren't going to read. They're actually real data about our company. And because I've challenged people's conventional wisdom, I have lots of credibility. So who do I have credibility with? I'm building credibility with the sales or the CFO and the sales leaders. So then they come to me and ask me, what should I do next? And then I'll say, well, let me put together some analysis to figure that out. Don't just answer. And then they give you the time and you come back with some thoughts and say, I'd like to read this out to a variety of different people. So what you typically find, and this is common, right? So these are very, very predictable things, is that the inbound class of the, there is commonalities about the inbound class. So if you're running an onboarding program, you learn a lot about all the new hires, where they come from, what their expectations are. So you collect a lot of information about what competitors are doing, other sales organizations doing, et cetera. So you can mine all that and provide information. The second thing that you can do is you can say, you know what? You can make observations about how all over the place the classes are. So for example, some people might hire very transactional people. Some people might hire very strategic people and say, here are our observations of our incoming class. Which type do you think is the spec that we're looking to hire for our future success? And say, the answer is probably, we don't know. And say, well, I'd be happy to take that on and say, before onboarding, maybe we need to look at being more proactive of figuring out what kind of talent spec that we've got and how we're doing our hiring processes. I know that this, and then you follow the same approach and you're going to find the same kind of incompleteness of data. And then there's another thing that you can say is, look, in order to collapse this, here's our definition of when a onboarded rep is. And then here's how long it takes to get somebody to quota. This gap in between isn't covered. Shouldn't this be the responsibility of frontline sales managers? Don't say it is the definition. Get people to buy into that. And then say, I've noticed that we don't have a frontline sales coaching program. I'd like to provide that. So you get acceptance on both of those. Then you get to go put together a proactive budget and say, this is the headcount resources that I'm going to need to execute it. And these are the steps that I need to go. And you're going to get the funding to do it. So you've expanded your footprint now from just onboarding to now you're helping the hiring process and the coaching process. You might as well give your identity as saying, I'm manufacturing the hire to retire process and I'm scaling it and make it more efficient. That's going to attract the attention of your CEO. Yeah. So those would be ways to leverage the work that you're doing to concentrate on communicating what those results are and provide information to many, many, many stakeholders whom are very interested in what your success is.
Yeah, and I will say, as somebody who's implemented, more proactively, that this works. And, I want to give you some tips here in order to wrap this up. The proactive approach is definitely what executives notice, especially the outcomes or the outputs of that more proactive approach. To do that, do what we did here. First, I would say you've got to practice being proactive. Try outlining things in terms of 3 to 5 actionable, top-down phases or chunks of work that need to happen, and see if it makes sense to you. And then shop that around to leaders and ask them if that makes sense as far as an end-to-end approach to thinking about an issue. And in that discussion, you'll start understanding root causes. The second thing is you've got to embrace this uncomfortable, this discomfort of being more thoughtful and end-to-end. That pause we put into the podcast here where we did a pattern interrupt, using neuro-linguistic programming. We basically pattern interrupted you, got you into the mainstream, and then you hit with something proactive. And for many people, my guess is you couldn't even process what Scott was talking about. You go back, re-listen to that, and then also, make a commitment to being proactive and being uncomfortable at first in that to get through it instead of just rejecting it. And then the third thing is when you look at this, I would test your talk track out and not expect it to be easy. If you can't get 10 minutes of people's time, you're going to have trouble in your role. You're going to be an individual contributor in your role. So if you can't get headspace for 10 minutes, that's going to be an issue. And as Jack Welch said, control your own destiny or somebody else will. So those are the 4 takeaways from this episode here. Hopefully we made you think, and hopefully we're going to help you be more proactive in 2020. Scott, anything you want to share before we go?
No, that's a great wrap up. I'd just say that, the benefit of being proactive is that you can do a lot better job of setting and managing expectations about what sales enablement is inside your company and what to expect from your department.
All right. Thanks, everybody, as always, for listening. Please continue to give us the feedback. We've heard from many of you over the last few weeks, especially with regard to our latest episode on who's our customer. Continue to give us that feedback. That helps us make our show better. Also, continue to give us topics that you're wrestling with. The one that we talked about today, of why are we here, is something that you guys have approached us with, and hopefully this was helpful. And then also reach out to us if you want what we call a think it through buddy. Scott and I like to talk in this proactive space. So if you want to talk stuff through, reach out to us, and we're happy to do that. And thanks so much for your time. We'll see you on the next episode of Inside Sales Enablement.
Thanks for joining us. To become an insider and amplify your journey, make sure you've subscribed to our show. If you have an idea for what Scott and Brian can cover in a future podcast, or have a story to share, please email them at engage@insidese.com. You can also connect with them online by going to insidese.com, following them on Twitter, or sending them a LinkedIn request.